you deal with this idea of like, yo, we need you as labor, right? Ain't nobody else picking the fruits, the vegetables, doing the work that immigrants are doing, migrant workers are doing, and yet at the same time they're saying, we don't want you here, we're going to deport you.
Absolutely.
How do you make sense of that?
Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, just the very notion of this, the idea of being an American has always been a very insulary idea for the longest time, right? Like, I mean, you can even go back. I know it's historical fiction, but like Gangs of New York is actually a really cool thing, like where you've got,
Absolutely.
but the rhetoric, the way that Daniel Day-Lewis's character, as a recent migrant himself, but would always shit on the Irish and be like, we need this for real Americans. It's like,
absolutely,
it goes back centuries trying to do this as who's a real American. But what we by doing this, and I love Roediger's kind of idea of like this divide and conquer strategy, because if you mislabel who's responsible for for the pain that you're suffering, and that's really what it is. We take the pain as a real thing, because capitalist exploitation and white supremacy, they freaking hurt. They hurt your life opportunities.
Yeah.
They lower your life chances, all these different things that happen. And so we have to be really clear that all of that on the very base material level is real, right? But it's I'm in 90s mode today. But like, do you remember that cat?
I'm here for it.
You remember Elliott Smith, the singer-songwriter who died of the heroin overdose?
I do, yes.
Okay, so he had this one phrase. I'm gonna screw it up a little bit, but he said like something. Don't you think you're being used? Because without an enemy, our anger gets confused, and that's what the right is really good at, is identifying this enemy. Now we would say, why don't the Democrats identify who the enemy is accurately? Because they're complicit in it through both white supremacy and capitalism. And this is where it gets really tricky. And this is why the Dems keep selling us out over and over and over again. That like when it comes to border protections, that happened under Clinton and Feinstein at the head in the early 90s.
Absolutely.
And we forget about that because they kept trying to do this, this globalist expansion of trade. And one of the things that I actually really like, this is going to sound weird, I love talking to objectivists, the people who follow the teachings of Ayn Rand really closely. About this is going to blow this
Ayn Rand. Look, we got enough time to get into Ayn Rand, bro.
I know. It hurts me to say this, but I saw this strange confluence. Okay. They actually say, because, if it's individual, they're SOBs, but they're principled SOBs.
Okay. And so I can give them that. I can give them that.
And so they say that, like, if you have absolute individual freedom and free market capitalism, then yes, you should have an absolute free flow of capital, and you should have an absolute free flow of people as well. And unfortunately, the second part is not what Clinton, Bush II, Obama, Trump, what any of them have advocated for in any way, shape, or form, because they keep saying we need to get tough on the border, without realizing. And then they've been exporting all of our trade overseas,
right?
Which and that was done under sort of this neoliberal ideology, but not allowing people to move freely. And so you end up having these areas where all of the industry has just been taken away. And so folks are hurting. And then what they don't really see all the inner workings of capitalism. And so then they rely on a couple of things. One, they see brown folks laboring. Yeah. And so they're like, that person must have stolen my job. Think about the white entitlement embedded in that phrase, right? Right.
And just like economic illiteracy, right? To the idea that somebody steals jobs as opposed to a owner or a worker or a boss or a landowner choosing who costs less, whose labor costs less. That's all that's about.
Exactly. And then not only that, it was only in the 80s and early 90s that multinational corporations had to say, like, we have to squeeze every last penny out of this that we can. So even though we have record profits, we still need to cut down our labor force. and it makes
Right.
people expendable. And unfortunately, we're so arrogant in America. What is it? We either have millionaires or people who haven't quite become millionaires yet. We're always
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
aspiring to
Yeah.
and unfortunately, so we identify more with Elon Musk than we do with our brothers and sisters and non-binary folk who are actually struggling on the material level. Because at the end of the day, like there was this whole thing about government inefficiency and all this Doge nonsense.
Which it
At the
kind of turns out has
end of the day,
cost us more.
of course it does. Well, because when you take away all of the folks that are doing the oversight,
Yeah.
then we lose billions of dollars because the capitalists are going to keep exploiting us. And
Right.
then they're going to play every loophole. They're going to find every way to, add a little, like you go to the bank and they say, okay, oh, you overdrew your account. You owe us $5 more. It's like, I can't pay you $5 because I just overdrew my account. I'm
Look at
broke. That's why I can't
now it's my turn to get a 90s reference. That's like most. If I had ID, I wouldn't need ID.
exactly.
What?
Wait, was that most or Common?
That's most. It's on a song with Common.
That's I was
Yeah.
getting my yeah.
Yeah.
See, there we go. But yeah, so my whole point here is that we're taught to, well, let me back up. Also notice, and this is why it's tough. But one thing that the previous election did show is that there's a massive discrepancy in the amount of time and energy that people can and will invest in learning about the political issues, right?
Yeah.
And so you get these big picture ideas, but you don't see the nuance. You don't see, how the sausage is made. And so people understand, they're like, well, and I understand this on a ground level, like, shoot, I was talking with my mechanic about this a couple of days ago. Like, why, he's like, well, why should the fat cats in Washington be able to do X, Y, and Z when I'm sitting here just trying to run an honest business here and I'm not getting subsidies, bail, all this stuff. And I understand that on a very deep level. So he supported Doge all the way around. And I was like, but dude, why do we need to be, giving billions of dollars in government subsidies to SpaceX? Like how does going to space in an Elon in an Elon
Yeah.
Musk, that's basically, him comparing, genital size with Jeff Bezos doing,
Right. Right.
I'm more endowed, you're more, all this nonsense. Like I kept saying, why should we be giving billion? And he's like, it's not. I said, no, come on, I was like, come on, please, just admit one time that you're wrong. And he was kind of thinking about it for a little bit, and he hasn't quite come around. But at least that seed was planted. Like, when you're talking about,
Absolutely.
because really what it's been doing is stripping away government oversight. And so that allows people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and people of the billionaire class fewer regulations so that they don't actually have to be accountable to anybody, which is just a disaster in and of itself, number one. And then number two, their own precious investments. They're not touched. In terms of government efficiency, I mean, Elon said early on that, and all of my contracts are up as well. Really, show me one Elon contract that got canceled. One.
And more than that, he gained contracts.
Exactly.
He gained contracts, right?
Exactly.
And I think what you're touching on, I think is such an important point, especially if you're a white person out there listening right now. It's if you doubt the organizing power or force or how salient the power of whiteness is in terms of what we think about Elon Musk and this anti-immigrant rhetoric offers a prime example. Elon Musk is a South African. He worked illegally in the United States in 1995, and he openly jokes about this. He would theoretically he would be deported today, and he would be one of those criminals and bad people that Trump is talking about. Instead, we have the exact opposite, right? We have a very realistic argument that could be made that he's the one running the show,
Exactly.
right? And so when we think about, I don't want people to reduce this conversation, and I know you're not saying this, but it's really important for me. While we are talking about labor and we're talking about capitalism and class, all of this is deeply tied to our racial imaginations,
Oh, it
right?
totally is.
Which is, and when I say, going all the way back to when I say Stephen Miller hit all the highlights, notice he threw out communism. The only
Mhm.
people talking about communism right now are people who hate communism. They need it so bad. And here's my thing,
Yeah.
and this is from somebody who I identify more with communism than I do probably any other economic system. But I want to talk about, why is communism so scary?